Good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of the Odegaard family, I'd like to thank you for joining us today as we celebrate the life of Paul Odegaard. As we begin our time, would you join me in prayer? Father, we thank you for the space we have today to be present to memories, to grief, to joy, to celebration. Father, we pray that today we'd be present to one another in all of those things, and in that you'd meet us. God, we're grateful for your presence here, that in moments like this, you draw near to us. So, Father, we pray that today we would experience your nearness and your comfort and your peace. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, friends, as we gather together today to celebrate and reflect on the earthly life of Paul, we also recognize that grief is fully present. There's heartache and pain, sadness and loneliness, laughter and joy in all of the memories. Our time together today is just one moment on this journey that we experience through the process of grief. But someone else is also fully present, God himself. Psalm 34:18 comes to mind as we experience these times. It tells us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. For those of us who are followers of Jesus, we hold this promise especially close in seasons like this. But it's more than just a promise to remember. It is a reality in which we experience. Our God, it says, is one who is acquainted with grief. In a story recorded for us in John chapter 11, Jesus comes to a scene similar to the one we find ourselves in today. Jesus comes to the city of Bethany and finds his friends mourning over the death of his friend Lazarus. As he arrives on the scene, he sees Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, and others who were there with them, grieving and weeping. He experiences all the questions that come along with grief and sees the full range of emotions that we experience that are flowing out of broken hearts. He himself, it says, is moved by strong emotions. It says that he was moved deeply in his spirit and troubled. Later on, it tells us that he wept. This happens as he is aware not only of his own grief at losing a friend, but the grief of those who are alive and remain, seeing the aftermath of death and its effect on those who are grieving. In this, friends, we discover a God who sees and a God who understands, a God who is present for every part of our journey. As believers in Jesus, we believe that death is not the end, but rather a doorway into the fullness of life. Paul is more alive right now than he ever was when he was here with us. He's experiencing the fullness of joy and the fullness of peace in the presence of his Savior. Because of Christ's life, death, and resurrection, the Apostle Paul tells us that we grieve, but not as those who are without hope. In this, even though we experience something as painful as this grief and loss, we can rest in the healing presence of Christ. And how God comes to us in these seasons of grief is often unexpected. Through a deep sense of his presence, the warm embrace of another, or the joy of shared memories. In that, our prayer for today, tomorrow, and through this long next season is that we be present to one another in all of that. In the fullness of this journey and all the emotions that it brings, may we find comfort and healing from a God who is present in that entire process. At this time, I'd like to invite Doug up to share on behalf of his dad.
All right. Thank you for coming. First, I just want to thank you for making the journey. Some of you have been from afar. I even want to thank those that are on the live stream as well, because thankfully technology can allow us to show it to people that aren't here as well. I want to thank Donnie, thank you for those words. Draylin up in the booth, thanks dude, I appreciate you covering. And Sue and the deaconesses, they're setting up a reception. It's going to be wonderful for you guys to just come and love on my mom and just be able to visit. So I wanted to, I'm going to be showing some photos during this, and I'm going to be describing some of them, and then we will watch a video slideshow that will give you even more color into my dad's life. So, Dre, if you could just cue up the next one for me, bud. Okay, so I want to give some context on this, on the photo, which you probably have seen in the obituary and different things and so forth. I had the pleasure of taking my dad and mom to my daughter Kana's graduation at U of M recently. It was just in May, right? And I was sitting a ways away, and I took this picture, and it just, I think it was hard, because I knew this was coming. I promise I'll try to hold it together during this. But it was just really cool. And when he passed and I was coming up with pictures, I'm just like, watching him wave like that was, I was so used to seeing that. You know, he'd come to our place or whatever, and he was always waving. So anyway, Mom and I kind of enjoyed that picture. So I just wanted to give you a little extra context behind that. So go ahead and go to the next one. Thank you. My sister Pam, as some of you know, she lives actually in a group home across the street over here, and she's, for Pam, she's developmentally delayed, and sometimes it's hard to describe what's going on, but at the same time, I think she fully knows what's going on. And Mom and I feel extremely blessed by Ashley, who's in the pink there, brought Pam to the house when Dad that was his hospital bed, and had an opportunity to say goodbye. And it was hard. It was really hard. But at the same time, go ahead and go to the next one. She was like pointing and squealing and, you know, doing all the communication that she does. And so it was a beautiful moment to be able to have her as part of it. So I just want to, you know, especially for anyone that works with Pam, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for taking care of her. And then go ahead and move to the next one, bud. Sorry, I have to say this for Donnie's benefit. You know, I've only done one sermon in my life, and so a eulogy's kind of like it, so I want to have 3 points. Okay. I'm going to talk about Dad as a husband and caregiver, and then I'm going to talk about him as a teacher, and then I'm going to talk about him as a shepherd. Dad was a great husband and caregiver. And my mom met him outside the Odegaard store, right? I just want to make sure I'm getting the facts here. They married and spent their first years in Missoula. And you can go to the next one. This is their wedding photo at American Lutheran Church in Billings. And I always wish that I could like hear the thoughts or the captions or the bubbles above them of like, what are you thinking right now? Go ahead and go to the next one. I found this picture in the albums of my parents who went to the Foresters Ball at the University of Montana. And I'm sure there's more stories behind it, which you can ask Mom later about. I just love this because I went to the Foresters Ball. Kana went to the Foresters Ball. I can't remember if you had or not, Isaac, but it was like, oh my gosh, we have a little legacy going on here. And then you can go ahead and go to the next one. This is a picture of my dad in the hospital when Mom came up to visit. And so just so you know, He was diagnosed with cancer in last November, and he was kind of given about 3 months, but by the grace of God and medical technology and chemotherapy, he lasted 9 months. So I feel blessed. And during that time, I had an opportunity to be with him on Tuesdays when I'd go to chemotherapy, and we got to really know each other almost better than we had the previous 53 years. So it was good. It was good. I just wanted to say, I believe, grew up in Conrad, Montana, but my grandpa wanted my dad back at home at the pharmacy in Billings. So I'll be talking a little bit about that coming up. But one of the things of my dad, so my mom has a MS, and he's been her caregiver. So this kind of flip-flop things. And my mom had to step into that role, and I did, and especially in the last days on hospice, it was hard. It was beautiful, but it was the hardest thing in the world. But thankfully, he's at peace. And so, but I want to talk just a little bit about his work ethic. Some days I was like, oh my gosh, my dad like instilled in me a work ethic that was relatively relentless. And I once in a while in the back of my mind, I'd be at the hospital or other places with him, and I'd be like, oh, that's customer service Paul coming out, serving customers, doing things like that. But honestly, he just wanted to care for other people. And that's what I learned. It wasn't him selling something, or it wasn't him whatever. He just loved people. Like, didn't matter who it was. And so one of the things about work ethic, go ahead, Draylin, and you can go to the next one. This is a picture of a trailer. And he loved camping. And this trailer has a big story behind it. And there are a few people out here that know and probably hurt from parts of the story, my Uncle Dave and Uncle Rich. And my dad decided to tear out the floor on the trailer, but then when you put the slide back in, it didn't quite close. And so I was like, Dad, why, I mean, even before he took out the floor, I'm like, Dad, can you just sell the trailer? Like, give it to somebody else and just do it. But he always had this thing, even with used cars, where he wanted to fix it up before he sold it, because he wanted to give them something that was functional, it worked, it ran. Well, Dave, Rich, how long did we work on, or did you work on this trailer? Months. Okay. So anyway, this was, and the work ethic behind it, or maybe as my dad said, why did I start this project? It just was a testimony to not only his work ethic, but his stubbornness, and then also his care for others. Because the day he sold this trailer, it almost broke my heart, because the guy that came, he was like, oh, this trailer's amazing, it's so clean, I would love this. And when he gave him the keys, he just broke down crying, because he's like, just take care of it, because I had so many good memories in it. And he wanted more memories. It was one of those things where I know my mom and I were talking about it, and it's like, could we do one more trip or whatever? And we kind of did to Finley Point, which I'll explain here in a few minutes. But it was just, he wanted that next couple that came from the Bitterroot, and they knew each other somehow, because everybody does in the Bitterroot. He wanted them to have a good experience. And so, yeah. So I want to, can I grab one of those Kleenexes? I just need a couple, thanks. That way I'm not sniffling a ton. Thank you. Okay. So the second point in this eulogy is Dad as a teacher. I didn't realize this. You know how, well, not all of you know, but I'm 54 now, and I think I've realized more about my dad in the last 5 years than I have my whole life. And I didn't see him as a teacher, but I realized he was. And we did traveling, and we traveled all over the place. And I realized maybe it's genetic from my lineage of my grandpa Wes, who was a traveler too, and then there's my dad, and then I like to travel. But he wanted to show us things. And another thing he loved to do was go camping at Finley Point. And you can go to the next slide. You know, it was interesting. We had an opportunity. For some reason, I got this crazy thought in my mind of why don't we take Grandpa and Grandma up to Finley Point for one more trip? And that was, I think, June. Yeah. And there was a point there where I wasn't sure if he was going to make it, you know. Kana and I went up there. We spent a night overnight, which was nice. But then they showed up, and it was wonderful. But what I didn't really realize until I looked at the pictures was how much they loved Finley Point. I mean, I knew they went up there, but then I'm looking at all the photos, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this goes back so long. And so, anyway, that's another place. He loved to teach us about camping. You can go to the next one. Skiing. Cindy, Leon, at his funeral, I took my dad skiing, and this was the last time I went skiing with Dad. And, you know, I'm just trying to remember, he was in his 70s, and he's shushing down the slopes I'm like, dude, it's just, he still had it. It was like riding a bike. But he loved to teach me how to ski when I was 4 years old at Big Sky. He loved to teach that. You can go to the next one. He also loved to teach my kids. And we had the opportunity to go up to a ski day up at Discovery like once a week during the ski season for $18. It was a rental, ski lift ticket, and just go. And my children, as you can see, they're a little smaller then, but they love skiing with Grandpa, and he loved skiing with them. And so it was pretty cool. Now I want to move on to business. My dad was involved in, you can move to the next slide, the Odegaard store. That's kind of where it all started. You know, big family. My grandpa Wes was a force of nature, I think is the way I want to call it. You know, it's funny. I just later in life, once I know a little more about people, I'm like, I think Grandpa Wes, I think he had like ADD. He just was like, you just couldn't slow him down. But it was amazing. So the Odegaard store happened, and all the brothers, you know, are there, and Aline was down in California, his sister. So it was, Dad was the baby of the family, and then Leon and John were older, and then Aline was kind of the second. And it's hard to see up there. At the reception, there's a better picture, but my grandpa and grandma in the front. And so Billings is where it started. And I learned my work ethic there too. I earned Matchbox cars for inventorying the nails or the greeting cards. And I realized later that they always gave me the rough jobs. Like, let's send Doug to the nail department so that he can count them. But I'm telling you, the Matchbox cars were awesome payment. It wasn't child labor, I promise you. But and then going to the store to solve the alarms when the pets got out of the pet store. There was a pet store downstairs. And once in a while, like one of the French lops would get out and turn off the police alarm, and we'd go down and catch the pet and come back. So lots of memories from Odegaard's. But then when that was sold, Dad went on a journey. It was like, okay, what's next? And so he did a fill-in pharmacy at Buttrey's across the street. He tried his hand at realty. That didn't really, it wasn't really his thing, but he had to make money somehow. And then Winter Hardware was a business that they invested in, and they worked that for many years. And then for some reason, he just got this wild hair to invest in a restaurant. And I don't know, I'm kind of thinking, John, if you're out there watching on the live stream, I think maybe Dos Machos, inspired my dad to buy a restaurant. Who knows? But Butler's Kitchen in Billings. And I will say, again, as a teacher, he taught me a lot in that business. That's where I learned project management. We did caterings up to 5,000 people. We were doing all kinds of stuff. But I realized he was my teacher. And even though it was kind of weird because your dad's your boss and stuff, looking back, I look back at it more favorably now than I may have in my middle years. But it really was learning. And then they started on a journey following the closing of that to the Bitterroot Valley. And my sister Pam being up here, they were always coming back and forth. So he took a job with Buttrey's in Hamilton, opening the store. And so the Bitterroot Valley, and you can go to the next slide now, allowed him to pursue his Master Gardener certification. He loved gardening. It's just, and as I'm standing here telling you this, I realized that Grandpa Wes had a greenhouse in the backyard, same thing. So I don't know, it must be in the family. I don't think it's passed to me yet, but maybe I have to get into my 60s to do that. So, and then he went to work for Albertsons here in town. And lots of people knew him from that store. Like, I swear, around Missoula or even here at church, people are like, I remember your dad. Yeah, he was the best pharmacist, and he just loved it. It was hard, and now that he's passed, I feel as though I can share a little bit about the end of his time. Is that okay, Mom? Okay. So it was really challenging for me because, as I said, Dad cared for people. And so one day at work, a person came up and they could not pay for their prescription. And so he went into his back pocket and he paid for it. Well, I hate to say it, but that was against company policy. And it caused him to lose his job. And it was right before his retirement. And it just hit me. It was hard for me. I did not shop at Albertsons for many years because of that. But at the same time, it showed my dad's heart. And so what happened was he went to work. His last job was at Partnership Health Center, and he loved it because he could love on people who really didn't have much, and he could get them set up with prescriptions and so forth. It's our public health center here in Missoula. And so it just showed me. He loved to be a teacher, but he also loved to love on people. And so this last point of my eulogy is Dad as a shepherd. And it wasn't until I had a lot of time with Dad in the last 5 days when he was on hospice. And by the way, for any of you out there, I honestly did not know what I was signing up for when we were like, okay, let's do hospice. I did not know that Mom and I would be the caregivers. And I thank my wife, Robin, who's, she's got nursing in her past, but it came to be the present because she helped us as well. And it wasn't until I was pushing meds and we were turning him and doing all that stuff, again, it was the most beautiful thing, but it was the hardest thing, that I really realized we were passing the torch because he had cared for us, and now we were caring for him. And in my mind, what I realized, even after he passed, was I think my dad modeled Jesus to me. But he didn't do it in a very verbal way. He was raised at the American Lutheran Church, Billings. I'm telling you, once you're a Lutheran, I don't think you can take it out of you. I mean, even, once in a while, I crave some of those weird salads we used to have at potlucks. But one person came to mind in terms of a couple of quotes, was St. Francis of Assisi. "The deeds you do may be the only sermon some person will hear today. Preach the Gospels every day, and only if you have to, use words." And I just was like, sorry, I use the word dude all the time. Donnie and I use the word dude all the time. And I was just like, I wanted to say that to my dad. I'm like, dude, you taught me more about Jesus than I thought. And we talked about it some, but it wasn't as much. And I realized as I looked back at his life, especially when I was preparing this, I was just like, he did it. Like at the cancer center. Okay, so we go every Tuesday. It's a day-long thing. And when he walked in, he talked to every person in there. Now again, is that customer service Paul? No. He was loving each of them. He would say to the housekeepers, he'd be like, thank you for what you do. It makes a difference. He would say that to the nurses. In the hospital, go ahead and go to the next slide. It was the same way, in there. He had a Filipino healthcare assistant. She was just a firecracker, and he just loved talking to her and just thanking her for the work. And he's like, this isn't very glamorous work, but I appreciate you taking care of me, And so, go ahead and go to the next one. This picture. Sorry, I gotta pause for a second. So, a little big news here, if you didn't know. My daughter's getting married next June 3rd, to Novik. And when they came over to say goodbye, my dad, who didn't have a lot of strength, popped right up. And the smile on his face, and if there's one thing about the Odegaards, a lot of us have a lot of skin around our eyeballs, and you don't see our eyeballs very often. So I knew when I'm seeing my dad's eyes like that, he's happy. And it was beautiful. And I love this picture because it's joy. And I'm so thankful that he made it this long to be able to say goodbye to you guys and send you off on your way. And so anyway, sorry. He was always there for me and had my back, but he didn't want to get in my way. I think he was always telling my mom, let him go. Let's get off the phone. He's busy. And toward the end, I was like, Dad, it's okay. It's okay. I can be busy. Because I want to be busy with you, because this is what I have left. So, just to close, thank you for listening to me sniffle. But I hope he modeled Jesus for you. And in this world where it's kind of hard right now to see Jesus modeled, I feel like my dad did it. He cared for others, and he loved on people,
And I'm just thankful for that. And I feel as though he was my teacher, he was my shepherd. And yeah, I just wanted to honor him today with this. And yeah, that's what I wanted to do. So I hope that this service, when we were kind of planning it, I know Robin was like, I'm going to do the eulogy and I'm going to kind of do everything. And she was totally right. She's like, maybe you should get somebody to help you. And that's where my good friend Donnie helped me. And thank you, brother. I appreciate it. What I did want to do, though, in this service was I wanted to give you a chance. And this is by no means pressure. But I went to a celebration of life for a really good friend of mine who passed away. He and I were best friends. And I got so much out of hearing stories from others about how my friend Greg, things that were funny to them or things that were just observations. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I did that too. And we got some laughs out of it and things like that. And so I just want to, and Donnie, sorry, I'm kind of stealing your thunder as far as introducing this, but I just want to give you guys a chance to, if you'd like to respond. Oh, my apologies. I totally forgot the slideshow. Hello. Let's move to that. Draylon, I'll pass it on to you, buddy, and then I'll turn it over to him.
Well, as Doug mentioned, we're going to now have a time of just open mic. If you'd like to come up and share, there's a microphone here that is on. But I can also bring a microphone to you if it's easier where you're sitting. So just shoot your hand up if you'd like to share from your seats, or you guys can come up here and use this microphone.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Taylor. I live in Colstrip, Montana with my wife, Vida. I was just returned from Vietnam in 1970. I was going to college in Billings, and the GI Bill didn't quite pay all the bills. So I went up and down the streets of Billings trying to find a job. The only place that didn't say no was Odegaard's and John Odegaard. At the time, Paul was doing a 6-month National Guard tour of duty, if you will. So I kept going back every week for like 4 or 5 weeks, and as spring came, they finally had an opening. They put me over in the pharmacy with Wes and Leon and Paul when he got back from his deployment. I worked there for several years, and then on a spring that came, it was real busy over in the hardware section, so they moved me over into the hardware section. Doug has covered so many of the wonderful attributes of Paul, and so I won't be too redundant, but Paul always came to work early. I mean, if you thought you could beat him to work, you couldn't do it. And he worked tirelessly, stocking Christmas or sale items. He ran the pharmacy, even though Wes was there working very hard, like they said, the Energizer Bunny. And John was over in the hardware store working there. Paul was a major, major player in the operation of the store on 1313 Grand. John was one of the owners, and was the owner actually, of the store out in the Heights on 1313 Main Street. Paul also bought toys and gifts, and one of the things that we did out in the Heights, they made me a manager actually after several years. One of the things that we did, we went to shows together, and we would spend all day at these shows buying toys, and then we'd go back to the motel and we'd spend another 3 or 4 hours until we were exhausted actually placing the orders. And so he taught me. I came from a ranch background, so I had no retail experience. I was going to be an accountant, so I did have some training in marketing and that kind of thing. But Paul taught me so much about the retail, and I learned from him what Doug alluded to, the fact that he loved his people. He loved his customers. He even lost a job trying to help someone that couldn't afford their medication. He had a big, big heart. The only time I ever saw him angry was when a customer shoplifted a corncob pipe, and he hid it in his trousers, and he was lying about it. So Paul had to rough him up a little bit to get that guy to come clean on the corncob pipe. But in his eulogy, alluded to the fact that he did a startup store in Colstrip. So what happened with that was early in the summer of 1979, Paul, John, Wes, and a guy by the name of Roger Hefner and I scraped together all the money we could, and we moved the store that was out in the Heights down to Colstrip. There was a mall there, and we took a space in that mall. We worked together, and he and I were able to purchase our shares of stock, the shares of stock from the other investors, and we ended up as the sole partners. We worked together several years. It's so long ago I can't remember how many. But eventually Colstrip slowed down after the construction, and we had to make a decision as if he was going to run it or I was. And it ended up that with Pam's situation, he needed to be closer to doctors and to her care. So I ended up buying that store from him and Andy, and I run it to this day. Well, what I will say is that there's no way in heaven that I could have been able to put together what I've been able to put together without the Odegaard family. Wes was an excellent teacher. He would come down. We had the pharmacy there in Colstrip. When we were short of pharmacists, he would come down and spend a week or whatever. He lived with us when he did, and he would tell us about all his trips to Egypt and all over the Mediterranean, everywhere else that he traveled. And Paul would come and help as well when we needed his help. But he just taught me so much about how to care for your customer, how to satisfy their needs. Paul was always a professional. And in my opinion, he set the tone for how Odegaard's operated all those years that they did in Billings and then also in Colstrip, simply by his demeanor and the fact that he would take time with the customers. He was patient with the customers. He was always gentle, and he always was just there for the people that needed him. I have to say that because he moved to Hamilton and I live in Colstrip, virtually on other ends of the state, we haven't been able to be close, but will always be in my heart. And I'd like to also just give a shout out if John's watching. I love you, John. John had a huge part in my life as well, training me and giving me opportunities to do what I do. I've been in the hardware business now for 55 years, and I'm still going. So anyway, just to all the Odegaard family, you could be very proud of Paul and all that he has done in his life. And in his eulogy, and Doug, you did a beautiful job talking about your dad and how special he was and how he took care of people that were in need. So, but anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm Shelley Castles. I am Paul's niece. My mom was Andy's sister. I'm just going to kind of piggyback off on it. It's kind of fun how some of the stories all just intertwine. So as I've been thinking about memories of Paul as a younger child, one of the things that maybe an earlier memory was piggybacking off on your toy shows. I remember a Thanksgiving. Our families would get together with Thanksgiving, and Uncle Paul brought the toy catalogs. And I remember sitting and just drooling over all of the toys that were going to be out there on the shelves for Christmas time. And Doug, I don't know if you remember sitting down after, and Gary, we would just drool over and look at the toys. And as a result, that also meant my parents sometimes, I think, had a little bit of an inside track on some of those hot toys at Christmas. And I think sometimes things were maybe set aside as they came in. And I remember some maybe clandestine trips down to Odegaard's where we had to sit in the car and mom or dad would run in. Another thing with Odegaard's was whenever we would go in as kids, no matter how busy Paul was at the pharmacy, he would take time to come out and greet us and at least say a quick hello before he had to get back and doing what he was doing. And then another kind of fun memory was when they had Butler's Kitchen. And so Butler's Kitchen was a roasted chicken restaurant in town, and my mom never fried chicken. That was the one thing she absolutely refused to cook. She didn't like frying, she didn't like the mess, so if we went for chicken, we would go out. And so I can remember some trips down to Butler's Kitchen and getting a tour of the kitchen. And if anybody remembers the rolls that they had, they were the best. And so we oftentimes had an extra basket that would come to the table, but I also remember hearing the secret to the rolls. And I'm not going to divulge that secret because I don't know if it's still a secret, but they're pretty good. So, just memories of Paul. He was just always kind and generous and had that time to just take that extra moment and sit with you and visit with you. And he's just going to be missed.
Hello, my name is Renee Mitchell. Gibbs is my maiden name. And I was first aware of the Odegaards because I grew up in Billings. And although I live in Missoula since '66, I love that I can drive across this beautiful state and have a foot in each side of it. But I got to know Paul because he worked at the Albertsons Osco. And you don't really, I've had pharmacists throughout the years, but other than Paul and the man that treated my husband at a different pharmacy, I've never known anybody nicer than the two of them. And we had a conversation, and that's when I found out he was from Billings. And I found out that he was in DeMolay with my brother Phil Gibbs. And he was just he's the kind of person you would never forget. I hardly knew him, and I don't know that I know any of you here. But Paul always, on several occasions, asked me if I knew Andy Barney, because we went to West High together. I have to say, I don't recall you from West High. But he always asked with kind of not an urgency, but a desire that I knew you, because I knew that he loved you and he would like that people knew you. And he was so fond of his family. And that's the only reason I came here today, because he's a person you don't forget. He's a person you wish this world had more of. And although, like I said, I didn't get to know him well, what I knew of him, I loved of him. And so did my brother. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, and my heart goes out to all of you.
My name is Paul Greer, not related, just first name coincidence there, but we were neighbors with Paul and Andy when we moved to Aspenwood Drive in 2015. Paul turned out to be a great neighbor. I love that guy because, first of all, when I first got the land, it was full of weeds. And you're supposed to keep it trimmed, cut the weeds down. And so I was out there with my lawnmower cutting where, and here comes Paul out to me, and he's got this piece of paper. And he gives me this paper, and it's the HOA map of our area. And I'm on it. And he's got our name, Paul and Joy Greer, and I got our phone number. We were living in Arlea at the time, but he really made us feel like we were at home. And he did a lot for us that first year we were building our house. He provided water for us until our pump was installed. We had water from his garden hose. He gave us lots of advice on things. I remember he would call us and let us know, there's a frost coming tonight, cover your garden. And he was always up on that. He came over one afternoon and said, I've got a couple hours. Is there anything I can do to help you with your house? And I said, yes. And so he did some caulking on our garage, and that was very helpful. I found out later, as when he was out picking raspberries in the morning, and when I'd come back walking for my dog, I would stop and talk to him. And that allowed him the opportunity to give me some raspberries for my breakfast. I learned that real quick. But he was really a good neighbor. He was so conscientious about what he did, and he kept his house amazing. His yard was like a garden, and he decorated his trees for Christmas. He was the envy of the neighborhood, so we're sure going to miss Paul. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Isaac Odegaard. I'm Paul's grandson, and I just wanted to share, I got to spend a lot of time with Paul, and I don't know if this is just because I was his grandson or something, but I feel like he was always really happy to be interested in whatever you guys were interested in, and happy to get involved with it. I feel like it's a bit of a Odegaard lineage thing, but we all seem to really enjoy transportation, so he dedicated a whole room of the house to model trains for me at one point, and got me into stamp collecting for a little while too, and I don't know, he was always just happy to dive into something new, and I feel like I have a lot of hobbies now that I've gone through, and maybe that's partly due to him. But I think it was really great when he took me out to Washington at one point, and we toured a bunch of aircraft museums and plants and stuff, and that was really cool. It was really great. It was just me and him staying at a family's house. I'm forgetting the name of right now. Muriel and Gunter. Sorry. But then I was starting to get really into just listening to music in general, and the way back he withstood about 8 hours of me scanning the radio through talk stations looking for something to listen to, and I'm sure that wasn't the most fun to listen to. And so that was definitely an act of love, and I think I don't know. I'm just happy that he was happy to be interested in whatever I was interested in, I guess. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kana. That's my grandpa. He taught me a lot, and I think I've been reflecting on that a lot recently. There's not much he didn't teach me, or that I know now that wasn't because of him and because of his encouragement. But I think one of my favorite things to do with him was feed birds and to paint birds and to watch birds. And he taught me how to identify all the little birdies I know now. And he would go through the Audubon books with me. And yeah, I never see a chickadee without thinking of him. And I really love that. I love that I have that. And yeah, like Isaac said, he was a really, really good grandpa. He was a classic grandpa of make Belgian waffles in the morning before we go out and build something in his garage, and then we'd go to a trip to, Valley Drug, is that what it's called? And get a toy, of course. And yeah, it was just, we'd always go camping. He was just the perfect grandpa, and I never ever doubted that he was my biggest fan. And then just that picture from my graduation, it was just, yeah, he was one of my very biggest supporters the whole way. And I love that. And yeah, I miss him. Yeah. And I'll bring this down for you, Grandma.
I just have to thank all of you for coming and enjoying this. It's a celebration. And my tears will come and go. I already understand how that works, but one day at a time. And I've already been given some sage advice in terms of how to deal with it. And I have two brothers who will not let me get into trouble because they, at least the past week, have been calling me every morning. So I appreciate that because that's true love. That's true love. And I really, I was just going to, no, I just wanted to say thank you for those of you who travel the distance as far as, I mean, I'm just overwhelmed. This is just wonderful. And I hope that those of you who are watching the streaming know how much a part of Paul's life you all were. He had so much love, and I am carrying him in my heart, and he and I will be together one of these days. I'm not planning on it soon because I still have a fair amount of living to do. So even though I hobble, but it's okay. I have a brother-in-law who has a scooter, so that might be one of my first purchases. So, okay, here you go.
Now the dirt. I'm Rich Barney, and I want to give a shout out to John, if he's over there. I too worked at Odegaard's. I didn't expect to work at Odegaard's, but my buddy Ken Edwards was there, and I felt that he got me the job with John. And I was out at the Heights store, and it was a miserable travel from the west side to the east side. And John, about a month into my employment, approached me. I delivered something, and he said, "Are you Andy's brother?" "Yeah, I am." "Well, how would you like to work on the west side of town?" Whew, I jumped on the chance. So I stayed there, I think, 2.5, 3 years. The dirt, I just can't think anything. You guys said professional, and he was. He was professional in just about everything he did. I did get annoyed once, and this was when you were in Park Hill Lane. I went out to help him mow the lawn. And so I finished on the lawn, and he started trimming. And when he trimmed, he pulled out an extension cord at least 100 foot long, and he trimmed up what he had to, and then he went to roll it up. And this was the Wes Odegaard, where he turned around, went like this, and rolled it up, and after he would do it, it would turn a figure 8 in all directions, and it was a knot. And oh, that bothered me so, because I saw little wires come out of the insulation. And Paul, you gotta quit that. Yeah. And anyway, I don't know how long he kept it or used it, but that one just was a bothersome one for me. Now the rest of his extension cords over the years were much cleaner. So maybe I helped him on that one. He did get a lot of help from his father-in-law, my dad, Ben Barney. And they moved into a house, their first house, I think, on Beth? Wingate, yeah. And it was a basic house, and that's all it was. It was just a house. There was no garage. I don't know how long they were there, but Dad came to me and said, "Rich, we're going to help Paul learn how to build a garage." Okay? And I was working out of town, 5 days on, 2 days off, or 10 days on, 4 days off. And I got there when they were finishing up a foundation. Luckily, Paul was able to tell me what my dad told him, so he had the basic skills of listening. But from that point on, I stayed at the front of the yard, and every week Dad was having 10 yards of sand and gravel brought in and dumped. And I mixed the concrete. And I never got to see the building built because I went back to college. But I don't know, August and September, I was mixing concrete. Paul was taking the wheelbarrow, and he was going from the mixer to Dad, who was filling whatever he chose to fill. And I remember a couple times Paul saying, "Man, that's a bigger garage than I ever thought of." Well, I saw it about a year later, and it was. Now, most double garages were 24 by 24 at that time. Dad added 12 to 15 foot onto the end of the garage. And I think as long as I could mix concrete, he was adding a patio too. You know, it was adding and adding and adding. And didn't work. Paul was paying for it. But what got me on this, you guys knew that you were going to, Terry, you were going to shows with them to buy things for Christmas. Did you ever know what happened to those things, those boxes? I can tell you, they were in that 15-foot front of his garage. And because he was storing it for the Odegaards for a number of years. And so I too went to one of those down in Dallas. My wife and I got to go there. And knew that if he still had that 15-foot, he would be filling it with Christmas. That didn't mean too much to me until Andy and Paul got to customize, build a house. The last two they did. And wouldn't you know it, Paul added 15 or more feet to the front of the garage. And it wasn't a shop, as Dad was probably dreaming. It was freezers, storage. That's the one thing that I think he got. Thank you.
Well, we're going to conclude this portion of our service. We have plenty of time for more stories. If you'd like to join us in the gym for refreshments and a time of reflection and celebration. On behalf of the family, we want to thank you guys all for being with us today as we celebrate Paul's life. Thank you.
Thank you.